I don't ever really approach it with the idea of, what will resonate with our fans. And I mean, maybe, I don't know, probably plenty of people tell me that's wrong. And I don't care. I approach everything with, does this resonate to me?
What's going on, everyone? It's time for another special presentation of the Takedown on SI. I'm Jon Alba, and I'm joined by someone who I've been waiting a long time to sit down one-on-one with. He is the number one contender to the AEW World Championship, Hangman Paige. He's going to be facing Jon Moxley at AEW All In on July 12th in Texas. Man, this is a long time coming for you chasing this title again. How are you?
Fantastic. How are you?
I'm great. And like I said, I've really been looking forward to sitting down with you here one-on-one because I think you're one of the most fascinating characters in all of professional wrestling, and you back it up with your work. So I want to turn the clocks back to 2021 here for a second.
Oh, God.
We're about 4 years removed from your first big triumphant moment in AEW when you defeated Kenny Omega at AEW Full Gear. And I'm curious, as far as you register it, what kind of parallels or differences do you see from your journey to the title then to your journey to the title now?
Yeah, obviously very different. I am a very different person. Some better, some for worse. I'm a very different person now than I was then. A very different outlook on, wrestling, life, all of it, the championship. Now than I had then. Then I was someone who was trying to, figure out if this is the world that I belonged in. And I wasn't sure. And being able to beat Kenny Omega to win the world championship was something that to me, would prove to myself that, this was worth it, that I was worth it. Now I know who I am. I know good and well who I am. I have not let myself deny that for the past 3 or 4 years, whatever it's been since then. Not only do I know who I am, my opponent knows who I am quite familiarly. He knows who I am very intimately. So yeah, totally different person, totally different wrestler, totally different opportunity, same championship.
But what I find interesting about that is that first journey that you had to winning the AEW World Championship. In its own right, it's this story of self-discovery and learning to trust others. You were abandoned by the people you did trust, and you had to weed the waters until you found another group of people who did have your back. And now, 4 years later, in a very different but almost similar way, we find ourselves in that spot. Why is that a central piece of who Hangman Page is in terms of finding his place in the world around him en route to trying to accomplish things?
Was this a sports interview or was this therapy? I don't. That is a good question. And that is probably a question that I will continue to try to answer for and to myself. For the rest of my time. I don't have an immediate answer to that. And the fact that, some of those things are similar should say something about me to me, more importantly, because, as a wrestler, someone who shows up on your television screens every week, I've tried to give you the most authentic and genuine, version of myself that I've been able to. And the idea that certain themes about my personality seem to persist should tell me something about myself that maybe I didn't know. So why, I don't know, other than maybe that's a genuine thing about me.
You mentioned authenticity. How important is authenticity to you in terms of resonating with the AEW audiences?
It is my primary goal. My primary focus is to be as authentically me as I can be. And that's not, with, the end goal in mind of resonating to our audience. I just, that's what I enjoy. That's what I like about this. That's what I think is ultimately best for any kind of art, right? And you could consider in many ways wrestling an art is to be genuine, to be authentic. I think that, creates the most important art. I think it creates, the most important line of thinking, not just for me, but for viewers as well. A shared line of thinking. I just think it's important,
Do you challenge yourself in that way to make sure that that's coming across to the viewers?
No, it's not very hard to be yourself if you can just decide to, you know.
And that's so interesting that you put it that way, because I do think that that's a motif that a lot of viewers and audience members who tune into AEW every single week and see Hangman Page navigating all these different life events, some of which very traumatic and very extreme. They find different things to relate to you with. How does that fuel you as you move forward as a performer, as you move forward in trying to provide them with these great memorable moments?
I don't ever really approach it with the idea of, what will resonate with our fans. And I mean, maybe, I don't know, probably plenty of people tell me that's wrong. And I don't care. I approach everything with, does this resonate to me? Is this me? Would this matter to me? Does this matter to me? In what way does it matter to me? Why does it matter to me? What would I do about it? Why would I care? And if it resonates with me, that is all I'm concerned about. And I've managed to make that fairly successful in wrestling. But it really wasn't about that. It's just about chasing what I was interested in. And this is what I have been interested in, and the way that I've approached, AEW. That's just been what I've been interested in doing. Yeah.
You said you ask yourself, why does it matter to you? So why does what you're doing right now matter to you?
I have spent the better part of 2 years, if not 2 full years, pushing away genuine friendship, genuine relationships, harboring hate, anger, with nothing to show for it. I've said plenty of times that, in the past 2 years, like I haven't won a tournament, I haven't won a championship. I've really, on paper, achieved little to nothing. And I needed a way to know that if I could let that hate and anger and rage and disappointment and shame, if I could let all of that go, because that would be difficult. That would be one of the most difficult things I've ever done in my life, to let that go, that I could have something to show for it. Not that the physical things, or the achievements matter as much as what is within, but, they had so far been a representation that holding on to all of that achieved nothing. And, if letting it go was going to achieve something, it would be nice to see that. And winning the Owen, facing Will Osprey, one of the best wrestlers in the world, and managing to beat him, and now moving on to main event this show, the largest show we've ever done in North America. I have an incredible sense of pride in knowing the decisions that I've made have led me here to this place.
What can people who then watch you and see that path that you've taken, what can they take away from seeing you move towards your goal in a way that's refreshed and renewed?
Um, I think for a long time, I lost the world championship, over 3 years ago now. And I think for a long time, there's a large part of me, very genuinely, that was afraid deep down that I had, achieved the most that I would ever achieve in this career, in my wrestling career. And that would be it. That certainly I'd maybe achieve some other things, but that was the highest of highs, and it was all downhill from here. And I was afraid that, I would never become world champion again. Like, that was a very genuine thing that I felt. And I did not lose sight of that goal. I chased it in maybe some of the more unadmirable ways in the past couple of years. Um, but in the past 6 months, I feel like, I've approached this championship match and, the idea of winning this championship much like I did the first time, the same kind of attitude. And I've gotten there. So, I'm not going to tell people what to do or what to make of my life. I can just, be appreciative that if someone sees something and it means something to them, I can appreciate that.
Would you classify this as a redemption story?
No, no.
Why not?
The things that I've done, I ended Christopher Daniels' professional wrestling career. I did that out of hate and anger. I could have pinned him probably 1,000 times before I did, or I guess being Texas Death, I could have just let him lay there, but I didn't, and that cost him his career. Some of the things like that I have done will never be undone. He will never wrestle again. He just won't, and I can't undo that. So for me, this is just deciding to choose a different path forward.
And that path takes you to Jon Moxley and the Death Riders, an entity that has taken up all the real estate in the main event of AEW for the last 9+ months. They've been a very controversial faction, both on screen and off screen to the viewing audience. What do you feel you bring to the table as a character that offsets everything that Jon Moxley has presented?
When this company was getting started, right, and even before, we were all working so collaboratively to put out the best wrestling show that we could. In terms of creativity, competition, but it wasn't just about wrestling. It was about the way that we looked after one another, the way we treated one another, the way that someone like Christopher Daniels, when I was 19 years old, treated me, when he didn't have to, and went out of his way to make me feel welcome and, that I could be something in the world of wrestling. That feeling is something that, when I saw the World Championship for the first time, when AEW was created and made that my personal and professional goal to win that, I saw all of those things, all those moments, all those feelings in that championship. It was all of that manifest. And that championship has been locked away. That feeling for me has been locked away inside of a briefcase for the better part of a year. It is, not just a professional goal to win that championship, but as someone who has benefited so much from, the world of wrestling and what AEW has been, it is my duty to free it, to take it out.
So is this a mission statement of trying to save AEW per se?
No, I don't think so. Not for me personally. For me, this championship, represented everything good that I felt about All Elite Wrestling and wrestling as a whole. And to have that hidden away for so long is disrespectful to, not just the entire roster, but to all of our fans. I do feel a sense of responsibility to take that back out.
Does the championship also represent the right things that Hangman Adam Page did in his journey?
Yeah, I don't know that would be for me to decide, but I feel like looking back on it, yeah, maybe so.
Do you reflect fondly on your time as world champion in hindsight? Because I really think that that's what lays at the core of this, right? Just a totally different person then versus now, and so many different shared experiences that you've had with other people on the roster, with the fans. Do you reflect fondly upon that period?
Yeah, I do. I had a lot of things happen during that championship reign that will stick with me forever. Some of them literally physically I will carry with me forever. I wrestled Bryan Danielson for an hour on television, one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life, and God, I hope is one of the hardest things I ever do again. I probably was injured and maimed and bled more than I've ever bled before in my match with Lance Archer. I remember like my eyebrow, he had the corner of the turnbuckle and gouged my eyebrow right here, and it bled more than like I've ever bled before. It got all my eyes. I couldn't see anything. Near impossible task of trying to finish him, someone that size, with a buckshot when he had taken the top rope off the ring, but figured out a way to do it. I had a handful of other matches. I wrestled Adam Cole twice, and eventually went on to lose it. But I do look back at all that time very fondly. Yeah, not just professionally, but in my personal life as well. We just had our first son. It was crazy. We had a baby at home. I was bringing the championship home, taking pictures with him with it all the time. Yeah.
How has that shaped who you are today?
Yeah, a lot, I think, because that is a feeling and a pride that I want back. Yeah, and maybe I didn't realize that until now when I'm talking about it. But yeah, having him in our house for the first time and bringing that championship home and taking pictures with him with it, and letting him hold it. He didn't have a clue what was going on. He was a few months old, but I was just so proud of everything in my life in that moment.
Yeah, and what's so crazy about the cyclical nature of pro wrestling and it being a 52 week a year story is that you have characters who are at the forefront and then they fade to the background, they stay on the side, then they come back into the forefront and they come back out. And I've always had this theory about you, and I've put it on social media a few times. I've been waiting to ask you this. I feel like Hangman Adam Page is the main character of AEW. And I don't mean that in a way of like, oh, main character syndrome or anything of that. But everything important that happens in the timeline of AEW, Hangman Page plays a really important role in. Sometimes at the forefront, sometimes he's on the side with Swerve, and all of a sudden that becomes the central story to the program. Sometimes you take a step back and you're retiring Christopher Daniels, and then you find yourself back up in front at the biggest show of the year, in front of the biggest North American audience the company's ever performed in front of. How do you feel about that assessment, that Hangman Page may be the main character of AEW?
Whoever that comes from at any given time, I don't know, I'll feel gracious, but ultimately, like, that is not for me to decide. It's up to anyone, who's a viewer to decide, who they're attached to, who they feel like is in that kind of position for them personally. So yeah, an immense amount of gratitude if that is, your take or anyone else's take. But for me, it's just another week at work, I guess.
Yeah. So what do you feel your role is then?
I'm a professional wrestler. Yeah, I go to work on Wednesdays. I do Dynamite. We have pay-per-views on the weekends. And, I just do the best that I can at the job that I have.
You do a good job at it, for what it's worth. I'd love to ask you about Swerve and Osprey, because they're really important characters in everything that's going on right now. What sort of impact did your past with Swerve have on where you are right now?
Probably everything.
How so?
He, the first time I really ever spoke to him, he confronted me in the ring after I had won a battle royal and donated the winnings to charity. The battle royal might have been the first match on the show or pre-show even, I don't know. And he said, you're a former world champion and this is what you're doing. Where is your ambition? Where's your sense of pride, your drive? And it pissed me off, but in a lot of ways, maybe he was right. Maybe he had a point. He obviously did something that he should have never done. after that. And that didn't make his point any better. And it created an obsession within me to destroy him. And I did. I mean, I did it. I cost him the world championship and I nearly killed him. And I thought about it. But once I'd gotten through that, I realized that with drive and ambition reignited in me, it was for something that brought me nothing. When I talk about having the world championship at home with my son and how proud I wasn't proud once I beat Swerve. You know, the feeling that I was chasing, I didn't get it from that. And I recognized that I got it from winning that world championship. And that had to be my focus, and that I would have to put everything that was between us behind me to do that.
On the show, we've seen these moments of hesitation with him, but also it almost feels like subtle realizations of perhaps common goals. Do you feel any of that?
Yeah, I don't know. I know what my goal is, right? It's to defeat Jon Moxley, Death Riders, the Elite, all of the above, and free that world championship from the briefcase. I know that is my goal. And from the outside looking in, if I'm Swerve, that's not me winning the world championship. I mean, he's had his problems with Death Riders, with the Elite. I don't know where my head would be if I were him. I'm not going to pretend to try to figure that out. That's for him to decide, who he wants to be, what he wants to do, if anything. This is not his match. This is my match with Jon Moxley. And it's also a weird thing I can't believe I have to say this. It's a weird thing to go to work week in and week out with someone who broke into your home. And month after month after month, have your feelings about that. And then what you did to them in return, to process all that and to see them every week in the hallway. It's a weird thing. It's a really weird thing. I can't put into words where my mind has been about it either.
Would you be open to or embrace any help from he or Will Osprey in this fight against them?
After or before our match, Osprey told me that he would have my back in this, and I appreciate that. And he has had my back, and I've tried to have his in turn. I really appreciate that. With Swerve, I made a promise that I would not accept or need help from him. That I can't. This is a man who broke into my home. I cannot work alongside him.
I just asked that because, as we've discussed in this conversation, there have been times in your life where, in real life at home and here on television, where you have lost everything and then put your trust in people and gained it back. And it feels like, with the cyclical nature of all this, that maybe you could find yourself in a situation like that again as we head into All In here. So how do you approach that All In match and that main event and what it could mean for you personally and professionally as we wrap up here?
I have faced Jon Moxley before, and I've beaten him twice. Once in the Texas Death. I made Jon Moxley tap out. I'm probably one of the only people to ever have done that, ever, in all of wrestling. I know that I have the ability to do it. I don't doubt that whatsoever. There are going to be a dozen or more people behind him trying to get involved. I can't think of a time where he had a championship match where they didn't. And like with Will Osprey, I guess I do have people who have my back. Will Osprey, Joe, Shibata, Hobbs, probably a handful of others that, I don't even know yet that would have my back, who may. All I can do is look straight ahead and straight across the ring to my opponent, who is Jon Moxley, because ultimately that is the man that I would have to beat to win this championship, and that is the only thing that I can be focused on.
He is Hangman Adam Page. He's the number one contender for the AEW World Championship against Jon Moxley at All In July 12th in Texas. Really appreciate you hopping on the takedown here on SI, and best wishes to you, my friend, as you move forward with everything.
All right. Appreciate it. Thank you.